Sorry?
What is that?
What's what?
Apathy?
Apathy? I've actually never thought about it in the 6 years of being down here. I suppose it's a space where you just are indifferent, you don't care. Oftentimes when my wife and I are standing in the kitchen and she says to me, "So let's talk about something." I pretend as if I didn't hear her. And she smacks me on the head with a pot. "Oh yes, did you say something?" Then I'm pushed into interest. Not because I'm interested, but what is the definition of apathy? Since you guys have your phones around.
I'm pretty sure it's just indifference.
When you're very young, I think you have the ability and the creativity and the imagination to just make life work. You can entertain yourself with a pebble as you're walking around the lake for 2 hours. We used to take our kids to some park, and every second they would bend over and pick up something, and that would entertain them for 5 hours. Now, where do you want to go? I don't care. What do you want to eat? I don't care. Is there a movie you'd like to watch? Doesn't really matter. It's like being alive, being dead, nothing really matters. And as you get older, it's really difficult to find things that are interesting. First, because kind of like the story we talked about the other day, that you're civilized by your parents, you're civilized in school, you're civilized at your work, you're civilized by society. And the way, hello, all these environments impose themselves upon you, after a while you really don't have much to sing, you don't really have much places to go. And you realize whether you read this book or that book, you go out with this person or that person, in the end they're all the same. So after a while you just become indifferent. Until something touches you. I'll tell you a story, and forgive me for the self-indulgence. One of the problems with trying to be reflective, one of the problems with being objective, being rational, after, of course, going through some intoxication, in other words, being consumed by emotions and passions, one of the ways you can see things clearly is by not allowing your feelings to contaminate it. Okay? In other words, if I want to understand what death is, I have to look at my father when I go see him tomorrow. He's 90. He can go at any time. So I can either look at him and get teary-eyed, hello, and kind of lose control and act like an idiot, or I can sit back and say, this is a man who came here at the age of 50 as an immigrant, washed cars for about 20 years. He's not 90. His body is weak. His mind is feeble. And it's very natural for people from this age on to kind of just slowly go into the good night. Okay? When you approach life in such a detached way, what you realize after a while is that you begin to lose the ability to feel. It becomes an addiction. You only want to understand. Okay? But you only want to understand after many years of feeling. It's like you have a trauma that's been haunting you for the past 20 years, and after a while you say, I am so tired of having my emotions push me around. It messes up my classroom environment, it messes up my relationships, it messes up me. I'm just tired. And then you go to a therapist office. And what the therapist will try to do is kind of like a butcher that separates the meat from the fat or the meat from the skin. What the butcher tries to do is separate your emotions from the event. And once your emotions are gone, now a different part of you comes out and says, okay, let me look at this event. What the hell is this all about? And like a good scientist, you take this rat, cut it in half, and you look inside it. And then you slowly begin to understand. So that has been my life for the past maybe 30, 40 years. Okay? And many moments I had imagined that I really have lost the ability to have any emotions towards anything. Because I have, for the most of my life, I've tried to understand things, not so much as be consumed by emotions. That's just silly, after a while, for me at least. Then I remember someone calling me saying, you know, Amir, your teacher has cancer. I immediately pick up the phone, call Hussein. I heard what's going on. Is there something I can do for you? And he said, yeah, get lost. He didn't, but I said, why don't I make food for you? I'll make it in Oakland, drive to Sacramento, just give it to you and then come back. It's not a problem. I still didn't much care about him passing because Sid was alive. I could, hear his voice and go to his house and just see how he was doing once in a while. Then my sister called and said, Hussein died. And it was just a couple years ago. And I remember going to my study, getting on the floor in like a fetal position and just crying. Because who I am today is really because of him. And it's what I tell my students all the time. Those who did go to school because of my classes, got their PhDs, are now teaching. They have family lives. They're doing really, really good despite being kind of depressed for a long time. I always tell them, if you think that you've accomplished anything in your life, it's because of not so much me, but because of Hussein. And so for the first time in many years, I realized that I actually do have the capacity to get really, really emotional. And in fact, tear up and cry like a little kid. I haven't lost that ability, but I do that only for things I really, really care about. And so a good portion of life that takes place around me, I am indifferent towards. If my kid comes to me and says, I got an F on the essay, I'm going to start crying, I don't really care. Because I know that it's going to take them about 20, 30 years to figure things out, if they're mentally and psychologically healthy. If they come to me and say, oh, Dad, my boyfriend left me, I don't really care. These are not things that worry me, So I think apathy for the most part is the absence of meaning. You look into things and you want some passion, some creativity, some meaning, and there is none. And so after a while, you just look at everything in a very, casual way. Until an event takes place in your life. And you suffer a loss. And then you begin to feel. And then you begin to care. And a different part of you shows up. And you like it. It's a surprise, but you like it. The other thing is, privilege also makes you quite apathetic. If you have lots of money in your pocket, if you have lots of options, if you're young, you have lots of time and energy, you just waste it. And you waste it because you're basically indifferent towards youth, towards energy, towards the time that you spend or waste on things. It's always good to hang out with people. I used to work volunteer for hospice, as well as child life services after I buried some people. I said, this is interesting. Maybe I should go and volunteer for like mortuary in Sacramento, Sunrise. The huge cemetery, beautiful. And you realize something happens to you when you hang out with or in environments that are very poor. And by poverty, I mean where people have to struggle, whether their struggle is emotional, whether it's physical, intellectual. But when there is struggle, when there is pain, when you see pain in another human being's face or life, it moves you, it does something to you. Unless you become profoundly callous, that's a different story. And it's not a bad thing to become callous, because then you say, I'm only going to help those who I think are worth helping. It's like, you've the point is, are you going to be biased? Yes. Are you going to be prejudiced? Yes. Are you going to be a bigot, a racist, all sorts of awful things? Yes. But you do it for good reasons. My first 5 wives were all alcoholics. I imagined I have the power to fix them. Now, when someone says, I drink too much, I don't care. You can't fix such people. And even if you could, it's not an easy thing. It takes about 20 years. Am I willing to give my life to another human being for 20? No, are you kidding? Can we, Olivia? Anything?
Talk about Diogenes.
Okay. Terry, what can you do? I had a 15-year-old in my class. She was going to, I think, circus school. She wanted to be a clown. And the first day of class, she came here, and her mother was with her, making sure that it's the right class for her. And every so often, her hand would go up and she would spit out something that the Buddha had said, or Lao Tzu had said, or Jesus had said. I looked and said, you're 15? And you spit out all the stuff from all these people who are so dark and gloomy. Just drop the class and go out there and have a good time with life. You're 15. The time for gloom will come, I assure you. A week later, she dropped the class. She became a nun, which is far worse. Just kidding. All right, let's talk about cynicism. If some of you don't know what the word means, you go to bed thinking that when you wake up, the sky is going to be blue and sunny, it's going to be nice, you're going to go out for a walk, and you wake up, you look up, it's raining, the clouds are there, dark and bleak, and it's everywhere, and there is no sun to be found anywhere. So every time you go out, it's like you come back like taking a shower, completely soaked. That's cynicism. Even though the sun may be out, it's still quite dark. Before we talk about Diogenes, this particular school that has always really existed, let me tell you a story, or maybe not. Am I boring you? Because I'm certainly boring myself. Just because I've talked about this stuff before to myself. Diogenes had no friends. And the first thing you need to ask is, why do we have friends? What do we have in common with them? What do we talk to them about? And if you want to talk to your friends, well, why not just have a journal? And when you write your thoughts and emotions down, it's like seeing your own reflection in the pages. That's what friendships are, really. The only thing that's missing is someone sitting across you and having a cup of coffee with you. Diogenes came to realize that he has no need for friends. He is rich within, he can think, he can feel, he can express his ideas. But he did have a friend who was profoundly faithful. It was a dog. He's called Diogenes the dog, and for a good reason. People get married, they have a couple of fights, they also have a couple of kids, they divorce, they become their worst enemies. People have friends, they get into a tiny little tiff, it snowballs, and then they say nasty things about each other on their Facebook page. Human relationships are fickle. It's like having 10 cups of coffee on a tray and you're holding it like this. A single drop on your wrist will tip the tray and everything will fall. That is what friendship is. That's the reason why someone like Henry David Thoreau would say, if you have one good friend, you're profoundly rich. And if you lose that one good friend, you become profoundly poor. So for those of you in this class who have no money in your pocket and you have no shelter to house your flesh, if you do have one really, really good, trusted, faithful friend, you're profoundly rich. Consider yourself to be very lucky. Diogenes had argued that I can whistle and my dog will come to me. Then I can kick him and my dog will go away. Then I'll whistle, then my dog will come back to me. And he had argued that you can't find such faith in human beings. That's why I have a dog. That dog will remain forever faithful to me. Even when I die, he'll sit by my graveside. Diogenes lived at a time of Alexander the Great. It's like the king who owned the entire world almost. And so he had heard so much about Diogenes and what a great mind that he had, that he says to himself, I'm going to visit this man to figure out who and what he is. So he goes and finds Diogenes. He says, hi, I'm Alexander the Great, the king of the world. And Diogenes looks at him and says, you know, you're blocking the sun. Can you remove yourself? I really have no need for you. Get lost. And very much like what Shakespeare would say a few years later, which is, when you tickle us, we laugh. When you cut us, we bleed. When you betray us, we seek revenge. Whether you're a king or a slave, white, black, blue, brown, it makes no difference. If you want to know the most democratic force on the sun, it's death. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. It doesn't matter how intellectual or emotional you are. Once it's time for you to die, you're 6 feet under. Diogenes also lived in a tub. For those of you who don't find your parents' space very meaningful, you don't find society a good place to stay, go to Yosemite. Go to first Target when no one's looking. Put a nice little tent in your pocket or backpack. Then, quietly come out. Get on a bus. Go to Yosemite. You'll find yourself amongst woods. He has a tub because Human beings are born to be restless. There is this wonderful passage in the New Testament that if you look at the birds, they have branches of the trees to sit on. If you look at the foxes, they dig themselves a hole and create a shelter for themselves in the belly of the earth. But human beings, I mean, look at us. You live in a studio, you move into a one-bedroom, from a one-bedroom to a two-bedroom, from Oakland to Richmond, from Richmond to Berkeley, from Berkeley to Roseville, from Roseville to Nevada. You buy this car, then you sell it, you buy another car, you have this house, and you sell another car. Just, there's no end to it. Kendra. And since all of us are born to be restless, why have a home that creates the illusion of stability and permanence? He wasn't married either. Part of it really has to do with the fact that he's a man, and for you men in this class, you should read a little Schopenhauer, the German philosopher. You get married for only one reason. The woman contaminates you, deceives you, cons you into falling in love with her. Then one day she comes to you and says to you, "Are you going to marry me?" What can you say? You really have two options. Either get out or stay. But you can't get out, you spend too much time with her. So out of desperation and wanting to keep the relationship, you say, "Of course I'll marry you, I love you," even though you have no idea what they mean. And they marry you not because they like you, they marry you for one simple reason: babies. And once a woman has a child, the man becomes disposable. He's only good really for a couple of things: food, shelter, i.e. money. That's all. He has no other usage. So Diogenes came to believe that marriage really is something that, I'm not sure if all men, but at least for him, should be avoided at all costs. It's just not worth it. Because men don't usually gain much from a marriage. They don't. They lose everything and gain nothing. If you don't believe me, try it out. So when we come back here on Tuesday, I want to hear that some of you in this class have gotten married. He didn't have children. Another great insight. Children. Yuck. Why do people have children? Casera? Why? Yes. And how does this accident come about, Casera? Well, I don't think you can like drink 36 bottles of beer and then all of a sudden get pregnant. There you go, see? Oh my God. So the children are the outcome of what again? Sex, not love. Sex. Love comes later. Okay? So first there is attraction, then there is lust, then you keep injecting emotions into lust, it becomes love. Then you have sex, because there is nothing to do after that. And you don't have sex because you want children, you have sex because you want union with your companion. And because she has conned you, deceived you, she knocks on your door a few weeks later and says, "Oops." Oops what? I missed my, what? Credit card? No. I missed my cycle. What cycle? Are we talking about reincarnation, rebirth? You're going to be a dad. Of course, men, being the sort of stupid animals that they are, they're excited. Not knowing what's going to happen to their life in a few weeks or months or years. Isn't this class exciting? Aren't you guys inspired to go out there, find yourself a companion, get married, have sex?
Yeah.
See, there are many ways to save the planet. One of them is this class. Sucking the air out of this room?
Yeah.
Are you happy with your question so far? Diogenes was a man who valued his time because he knew how to spend his time. Not to hang out with losers, have coffee, get them pregnant, have babies. He wanted his time to mean something. He enjoyed his solitude. He enjoyed his freedom to think, to feel. He also knew the dangerousness of living in society. He was, of course, living at a time of Plato and Socrates to some extent. And he had seen the fate of Socrates, he had seen the fate of Plato. Plato eventually locked himself in a room and just wrote. There is no one to talk to, really. So for those of you in this class who have journals, you are to some extent a tiny mini Diogenes. 8 billion people on this planet, YouTube, Tinder, Facebook, Tinder, Instagram, Tinder, coffee shops, Tinder. You can use all these different platforms to express what lives inside you, but no, that's not what you do. You grab yourself, your journal, and you write your stuff in it. Why? You're all alone. You're far too private. And you've come to understand that no one really understands you or can understand you. Perhaps you don't even want to be understood by others because you know they could come back and hurt you. So you keep things to yourself. Diogenes knew all of those things. And so once you have kids, what's going to happen? Tragically enough, you're going to love them. Your parents love you, all of you. But after a while, your parents will give up on you. They have no other choice. Why? Because human beings don't listen. You want to go out there and exercise your independence, autonomy. Oh, you think that you're creative, that your life is going to amount to something. Your parents know better. And after a while, you realize love is replaced only with frustration, anxiety, fear. I was speaking to my mom a couple of days ago. My sister has 2 kids. One 23, I think, the other is 22. Good morning. So, a couple of weeks ago, she goes to Ohio to move her son to this place and cook for him, clean for him, go shopping for him. Then she comes back. 2 days later, she's in San Francisco, trying to move her other kid. And so I call my mom and I say, so where is Sarah, my sister? She says, oh, she's stupid. Why? Last week she was with Armand, this week she's with Kiana. Why does she spend so much time taking care of her kids? But my mom is 80 now. She looks at her life and she says to herself probably, what a waste. I got married to this guy, my husband, nice guy. Then we had sex, fun, but the outcome was disastrous. 3 kids. cook for them, clean for them, worry about them. And now I'm 80. What have I done with my life? Nothing. Kids. Completely useless. There's a reason why you should be always going home and thanking your parents. And not because they're not mean-spirited sometimes, not because they're not vicious sometimes, but because of you guys. They have lost everything that means anything in life. I mean, look at you guys. Yuck. And they have to see you, be around you, live with you. Terry, how are you? And then Diogenes died. Probably had a heart attack. Are we good? That's the story of Diogenes and cynicism. By the way, it is far better to be a cynic than an optimist. When you go out with an alcoholic, someone who drinks, be a cynic. Know from the very beginning you're not going to fix him. When you go out with someone who doesn't have a job, just know that eventually you're going to live in a tent. People's Park in Berkeley. When you're a cynic, life frightens you. You become more cautious. When you're an optimist, you make your life feel like Truman Show. All right, let's move on to another inspiring question. Olivia?
Talk about conquest.
The what? Like a journey?
Yeah.
This morning when I woke up, it was like 3:35. I woke up the kids. I said, I think tonight we're going to have Indian food. They said, Dad, I want to sleep. I said, no, what do you think? Indian food. And I told them Indian food because there's a place in Berkeley. I've gone to it for the past maybe 20 years. It's like burned in my brain. I just love their food. And once in a while, from nowhere, it's like when you want to end your life, everything is going well, but all of a sudden you say, well, maybe I should end it today. And it's like you're having a great time. I mean, there is your boyfriend on top of you guys having a great time. And you say, well, after this, I'm just going to end it. I know it's an odd time, but nevertheless, life is magical. I'm sorry for today's class. I mean, I really came here inspired, but just looking at you guys made me depressed. And so, that's a lot of tangerines. Too much vitamin C for someone your age, it's not positive. And so today I'm going to go on this spiritual quest. I'm going to get in my car, journey all the way to Berkeley. patiently wait for my gods in the kitchen to make me this chicken tikka masala, mixed vegetables, garlic naan, and then make my journey back home, and then eat. Before you make any conquest, before you start any journey, you must have been exposed to something. Something must have advertised itself to you from somewhere. And if Freud is right, maybe there is something deep within that without any external forces all of a sudden taps you or smacks you in the face and says, by the way, did you know I'm here? Can you fix this? But generally for most of us, you're sitting, you're not very busy, you're in fact quite bored, and you pick up a book and it just happens to be like the autobiography of Malcolm X. That's a piece of advertisement. Or you're on college, you go to Trader Joe's, but before you get there, you pass by Zachary's, and just, it gets into your nose, the pizza, the deep dish. Or you pass by Barney's. So any journey requires a piece of advertisement. And that piece of advertisement must have been quite delicious. Maybe not in your taste buds, but certainly on your emotional buds. Something about you must have been activated. And then a good amount of yeast goes into it, and then it just bubbles and blossoms. Now, you could be inspired, you could go on this quest in different ways. You could run into a Brad Pitt, if that's your type. And now you're on this physical quest. You want to have him. Nothing wrong with that. And it'll take you probably about 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks to summon up the courage to go say hello to him. Another 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks to ask for his number. After a good amount of begging, which makes you somewhat religious at this stage, he invites you to his house. Now you're in the act of worshiping. You say, yes, Brad, no, Brad, okay, Brad, whatever you say, Brad. Now you become a lamb of God. You're ready to be sacrificed. And then the two of you have intimacy. And then after 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, you realize he's like 60 and you're 18. It's just a mismatch. And maybe he's just boring. I don't know if you've ever seen him in interviews. When they ask him like really good questions, he mumbles too much. He's very shallow. He's just stupid, but he looks good. Some quests could be, let me also add this before I forget. If there is anything any of you in this class have to overcome, whether it's depression, whether it's an addiction to alcohol or various kinds of drugs, whether it's pornography, whether it's fixing your relationship, whether it's fixing your relationship with your father, your mother, that is your quest. And all quests, all journeys have the same common denominators. They all have the same thing. You don't have, but you want. You don't have, but you need. You hunger for it, but there is a price to be paid. There are things to be overcome. So, if, for example, you don't like your father, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, you too have to find your own cross. And you too eventually need to come to this place in the Gospel of Luke. Okay, when you're mature enough to find empathy, you're able to put yourself in your father's shoes, understand his past, his history. And then you say, very much like Socrates, no one really wants to do harm to anyone. No one wants to be cruel. No one wants to be a bully. They just don't know any better. Your father didn't have you to push you around. Just life happened. Okay? So remember, Just because you read the dialogues of Plato, that may not be your quest, even though you may be profoundly interested. Plato, you can read, is there for only one reason: to help you how to think about mending your relationship with your dad, with your mom, getting over various addictions. There is nothing wrong with majoring in philosophy, but that's not really your quest. But the tools that philosophy can give you, wonderful. Okay? Then there is the emotional quest. Sometimes the emotions can be your own, sometimes it can be for another. Imagine I am an introvert, been dark and gloomy most of my life, and let's just say from the age 10, I've always felt that my life really is not worth living. Maybe I should just end it. Everything I touch eventually turns into dust. I become indifferent. They inspired me for 10 minutes, and then I had to live with them in boredom, frustration. Then they eventually suffocate me, and then I ask, why did I do it in the first place? And then everything I do in my life then is for me to find the tools to overcome this particular negative emotion so my life can continue. Sometimes a journey has to do with the emotion that lives inside, say, you as my companion. I come home and you're always, gloomy. We have kids. You got to be a bit more upbeat. I don't want the kids to turn out like you. Okay? So you and I will go to therapy. You and I will go to Bible classes. We'll go to church. We'll go on a cruise, hoping that a light may come from somewhere and you'll be transformed. Okay. Then there are intellectual journeys. You read somewhere that Plato had looked at Diogenes one day and said to him, "You're like Socrates, but you've gone completely mad. You're like Socrates times 25. What the hell is wrong with you? Who made you this way?" And all of a sudden you say, well, maybe I should read a lot of books about Diogenes and cynicism. Maybe I should figure out the relationship between Plato and Socrates and Plato and Diogenes. And then you read a lot of books. But then the phone rings and your friends tell you, let's go and have a good time. But you say, no, Diogenes. You're tempted by your friends and you have to overcome the temptation. Let's say you've come to a place in life where you don't really much care about physical quests, you don't much care about emotional quests, you don't much care about understanding things with your head. You feel as if you have a soul. How you feel that, I don't really know. You just feel like you have one of those things. And you want to figure out, what it means. So you watch a lot of Oprah Winfrey shows. And you realize, well, she sucks, really. And then you watch a good amount of Jordan Peterson's. You say, oh man, that guy sucks too. And then you go on this conquest, on this journey. What you have to understand about all these journeys are the following. You're walking into an environment that you've never been. There's a good amount of unknown, therefore darkness and confusion, frustration, irritation in it. And you have to be able to live with them. And that's tough. Okay. So, if I was to put this on the board, and forgive me those of you who have been in my classes, unfortunately for you, many, many times. The way it happens is, this is your life. Olivia. Okay? You're a flatliner because life is routine, normal, there's nothing going on really. You go to class, you take care of your parents, you cook, you clean, the things that people do. All of a sudden, there's a hiccup in life. Let's just say, forgive my extreme examples. I'm from the Middle East, so I'm an extremist. Let's say you go home and your parents are crying and you ask why, and they say, your dad has cancer, stage 4, he's going to die. And you're very close to your father. One of the things about tragedies such this is that first you're pushed outwardly. It's my father. I love him. What am I going to do when I come home and he's no longer here? Then you see your mom and you see grief consuming her. That's my mom. How's she going to survive this? And that's my kid brother. How is he going to survive this? Then you realize, well, your mom has been staying home while you guys were growing up. She has got no money, no education, no job. The only person who brings in the check is your father. So what the hell is going to happen to this house? So remember, tragedies force you to go outward. Then there comes a point where you say, now your father is on his deathbed in pain, moaning, groaning. And then eventually, if you happen to be Middle Eastern, you take him somewhere and you wash his body. It's usually done by men, so you won't do it. And then all of a sudden something happens to you where you say, man, you know, my father's only 45. He's so young. Is this how death comes about? Just without knocking? Just barges in? And the answer is yes. And now you have a set of questions that is outside of life, in the sense that the tables and chairs of your life will no longer provide you answers or comfort. And that is generally what is titled as a call. You know, it's like, I don't know, it's just a call. It's like this hammer bangs on your door and says, I'm here. And the problem with this particular call is that when your friends call you, they say, let's go to a party. You know where you're going to go. When a call comes and says to you, you should take some classes, well, you look at the schedule and there are answers for you. The problem with this particular call is that there are no seemingly answers out there. Why am I here? Who the hell knows? What should I do with my life? Who the hell knows? Who are my friends? Who the hell knows? And with the call comes a good amount of what we call search. There are lots of answers, questions, but there are no answers. And the questions keep coming and coming and coming and coming. And what this particular call does, let's say I am your husband and both of us are very attached to each other, and you want to make sense of my departure. You ask your best friend, she's useless. You go to Google, Google is useless. You go to ChatGPT, write me an essay on death. You know, it's useless. And you realize all of a sudden 8 billion people on this planet, the world being so big, no one can give you any answers. And you realize in your call and in your search, there's a good amount of loneliness, and there's a good amount of depression, and there's a good amount of anger. And the problem is no one's going to understand it except you. You won't even understand it. You have to live with it. The problem with a call that ultimately amounts to search is that it creates a good amount of what we call struggle. If you come to my office and say, Amir, I got to see in the last essay or assignment, how do I get myself to an A? I'll give you some insights. You'll follow those guidelines and you end up with an A. The questions you begin to ask are a little strange. Nobody has answers. What you're looking for, you have no idea where to find them. And your struggle means, to some extent, you're doing everything in darkness, in the unknown. And we don't do well in those things. We want to have control over our environment. All of us in this class do. If you've been going out with someone for 5 years, and you're waiting for them to propose to you, you've been in the dark for the last 2 years, You want him to knock on your bedroom door and say, will you marry me? If you have missed a lot of classes and a lot of assignments and you know the end of the semester is approaching, you want to figure out where exactly you stand. So what do? The unknown is too much. You email me. You come to the office. You want clarity. What you have here is complete darkness. That's why you don't have very many philosophers. You have lots of people who have degrees in philosophy. They have information about philosophy, data about philosophy, knowledge about philosophy, but no one has the love or the wisdom that philosophy demands. Because there is too much darkness in it. Okay? You don't find very many philosophers like me looking for a Socrates. I am happy just reading books. I'm happy just taking classes, getting my degrees, and going my way. Can I tell you a story? Do you have any questions before we... Anything? No? Terry? Are we good? There are 3, 4, 5, 6 stages left, but I won't tell them to you because they're no good. Okay, let's move on. Anyone else? Alexis?
Last class, I was one of
Uh-huh. Okay. I'll tell you a story. Let me begin with a ridiculous story. A couple days ago, by the zoo, I saw 2 samurais fighting. I'm just kidding. It's an old story that comes from Japan. So 2 very proficient samurais begin to fight. And one of them has a son, and he's sitting back and watching this whole thing. He's very, very young. And then he sees his father being butchered by this other samurai. And the son loves his father, so he begins to cry and cry and cry. And when his weeping is done, he looks at his mother, and his mother is weeping. And to no end, she weeps every single day. And the son one day looks himself in the mirror and says, I'm going to be a samurai. I'm going to be the best swordsman that this country has ever seen. And then I'm going to find the man who killed my father. And I'm going to exact revenge. And the mother is very, very, very happy. So he spends the next 20 years of his life becoming really good. And he becomes awesome. And then he goes on this quest, finding this other samurai. And eventually he does. By this time, the samurai who was once 30 is now 70. He's old, he's weak. And the kid, this young man, goes to him and says, "Do you recognize me?" He says, "Yes, I killed your father some 20, 30 years ago. You're here to chop off my head, yes?" "Yeah, you destroyed my life." He says, "Okay, I'm ready. If you want to kill me, fine. Just one thing though. What is it?" "I've been living on the mountaintop for all these years, and every day I create this path, remove the rocks so that when peasants are climbing this hill to get some water, to get some flowers, to get some wheat, they don't fall to their deaths. Can you just wait until I remove the path or pave the path, clear the path? And then once I'm done, then you can kill me." "Fine," the kid says. So every day he sits and watches this old man going back and forth, clearing the road. And one day this kid says, "Maybe I should just help out this old man." And he does. I don't know how it happens that all of a sudden revenge goes away and is replaced with empathy and kindness and generosity. And the kid begins to help this old man every single day. And then after a few months, the road is cleared. And then the old man kneels before this young man and says, "I'm ready." And the young kid says, "How can I kill a man who's taught me what the value of life is?" And they become friends. In other words, he becomes a replacement of his father. You spend so many of your years simmering in anger and hate and revenge. And then you spend some more of your years in the exact opposite set of emotions, compassion and generosity and forgiveness. And little by little, as one seed grows, the other seed shrinks. You enter someone's domain with a good amount of anger and hate. As time is spent, as intimacy is formed, you realize that for some strange reason, از محبت خارها گل می شود، از محبت گریه خنده می شود. That love has the power to replace thorns with flowers and tears with laughter or joy. And you realize the only way that anyone can protect any seed worth protecting is by spending a good amount of time in the proper spaces. In other words, if you want to quit smoking, and it's something you've done for the past like 5 years, it's a seed that has a tremendous amount of space inside you. A good amount of your life revolves around that particular addiction. Now you want to change it. Well, your father hates smoking, let's just say. Well, just in case you get a call, stop smoking. Well, that's a call. And the problem with this call is that it births a brand new self inside you. It's a tiny self. You're getting older, uglier, smellier. Do you really want to keep smoking for the next 20, 30, 40 years? Sober up a little bit. Mature up, grow up. But this new seed has zero power to withstand the force of 20 years of addiction. And if you're ready, and if you're insightful, and if you're cunning, you say, the only person who is able to protect this coal is my father. I don't like him that much because every time I talk about smoking, do smoking, he harasses me, punishes me, if not physically, intellectually, emotionally. And I hate that. But you also have come to realize maybe this particular punishment is good for you. It'll save, protect your future. So you spend more time with your father as he punishes you every time he sees you daydreaming about smoking, he slaps you. But you also realize something interesting. چوب معلم گل است هر که نخورد خل است. That the punishment given to you through your father is an extension of his compassion. Not hate, compassion. He cares for your future. He wants you to get married, have children. He wants to be a grandfather. He wants to hang out with his grandkids. Okay? And so, what your father will do, given that he's a very, very smart man, he calls you one day and he's coughing. He's acting. He's not really sick. He says, I have to build this shed. It's too much on my back and my knees. Can you help me? He says, Dad, we're just going to go out there and smoke. But okay, I'll come help you. I'll smoke afterwards. And then he'll give you a nail gun. You say, what the hell is this? And he'll teach you. And all of a sudden, it's a nail gun. Wow, this is beautiful. He'll give you this miter saw, sliding miter saw. And you begin to cut 2x4s and 4x4s and 8x4s. You love it. And then you, little by little piece, slumber together and you have this beautiful shed. And while you were making the shed, you weren't thinking about smoking at all. Nothing. And then usually you go home, you take a shower, you rest, you smoke, and then you fall asleep. And this time you say, Dad, can I just stay over? Yeah, but you can't smoke. I don't want to smoke. I just want to stay over so in the morning I can wake up at 5 in the morning and start the shed again. Great. And your father's a healthy man, but because he knows how easily you'll be tempted, he'll just walk like this. That'll make you feel sad for him. He'll say, instead of going home, I'll just stay here, cook for him, clean for him, and build a shed. And every time you say, Dad, the shed is done. Let's put some solar panels on it. Shit. Okay. If at the beginning you did this with a good amount of grunts and groans and hate, now you love it. Not only do you love fixing this shed, but you also love the fact that you're helping out your father, that he can go into the shed and live in comfort. And when the solar panel is done, remember, you're still, this temptation is always there. He says, why don't we build a deck around the shed? Yeah. And as time goes on, and as the shed all of a sudden becomes a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, a 2nd story, 3rd story, it goes all the way up to the heavens. You realize the only thing you think about now are nail guns and saws and 2x4s. And how you can go to Home Depot and just pocket things without paying for them, which is something that I do. Or how you can call Amazon and say, I ordered ABCD, they didn't arrive. The truth is they did just need 5 of them. You didn't hear this from me, by the way. But do exercise it. It may, get you some free stuff. Aaron, you know what I'm talking about, right? And you realize something really interesting. After 5 or 6 years of being around your father and working with the shed, you realize that you can actually enjoy life without being high. Being around your father, building a shed, will give you a high that smoking will never be able to give you. That's how you protect the seed. Now, you wouldn't know how to do it on your own. It's impossible. You need someone from the outside, cunning enough to coerce you, manipulate you, dare I say, brainwash you, take away your life, and give you a different one, and protect it. But here's the thing. Anyone who wants to do good to you is never going to push you into anything you're not ready for. They will always, always, always ask your permission. Maybe initially they push a little, but then they sit back. Because you have tasted something. That taste has been burnt in your brain, in your memory bank. once in a while it comes up and says, you should do more, you can do more. And that's enough. That's like the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Okay? Once in a while it's going to come up and bite you. Now, you have a couple of options. You can play with it a little and then dismiss it. You can play with it a little and then allow it to be forgotten. Or you can pursue it. In the pursuit of a call, there is going to be this tremendous imbalance. In other words, you're Malcolm, the follower of Elijah Muhammad. You're also a Malcolm who has a life prior to meeting Elijah Muhammad. They're both seeds. Okay? And given the social structure, given how vulturous, how horrific it is, you're going to say it's much better to be the Malcolm from the age 5 to 25. Because love ain't going to get me much in this society. And neither is forgiveness. Neither is compassion. They suck. At the same time, you can't resist the love that you have tasted given to you by Reginald and Elijah. Now, these two lives begin to compete. The more he reads the Quran, the dimmer Malcolm becomes, the old Malcolm. Okay? The more he thinks, he nourishes it, protects it with his imagination, with his reflection, with the emotions connected to the Quran. And a new Malcolm. This old Malcolm slowly goes away. And then, of course, he meets Elijah. And this brand new Malcolm explodes. And this other Malcolm is completely annihilated, deleted. He understands the past. He understands society. He, in fact, the new Malcolm goes back and visits the friends of the old Malcolm to rescue them. You can't protect anything without investing time and energy. And because you're a student and because you're a novice, you can't do it on your own. Someone from the outside. Now, here's the other problem. Western societies, in particular America, you don't have a narrative that revolves around a love relationship between the student and the teacher. You have a lot of David Korushes. You have a lot of UFO people. You have a lot of Elizabeth Prophet Center. You have a lot of Scientology Center. Okay? So a good amount of narratives exist in this culture has to do with some guy like, what's his name? L. Ron Hubbard. Scientology really is rooted in two people sitting somewhere and making a bet. No different than Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. Okay? Because in a teacher-student relationship, there is going to be a good amount of manipulation. And manipulation really is kind of like this. You're sitting, life is boring, you smoke. You manipulate your brain chemistry. And in coercing the brain chemistry, you have a different perspective about life now that you're high. Teachers are no different. Teachers also change your brain chemistry. They create emotions. They create certain aspects of reflection. They create a new you, okay? But what happens, the assumption is, well, you're not going to be addicted to weed, but you are. But the moment you say, I'm now addicted to a teacher, all of a sudden comes this American philosophy of independence, autonomy, manipulation, coercion. We don't have those things in the East. So in India, for example, you in fact have over 250 books that teach you how to sit in the presence of your teacher appropriately. So when you look at, for example, someone in India, in the presence of their teacher, they throw flowers, they bow, they weep, they do all sorts of things. And you say, what the hell is this? Well, they're very lucky in the sense that they have found someone they can worship down here. And it's not easy. I mean, when you and I fall in love, romantic love, you have found someone to pray to worship, to sacrifice yourself for. It lasts for about 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. We do it and we like it. Because in love, what happens, you forget yourself, you forget your desires, you forget your past. You're there to please another. You become a sacrificial lamb. And in love, you find your freedom. And freedom from what? Freedom from all the shit that happens to us on a daily basis, all the boundaries created inside us by our own psyche as well as social pressures. You know, you need money, but you call in and say, I'm sick, I can't make it. I had one of my best friends, Farhad Sheikhul Islam. We used to play tennis together every single day on the courts in Davis. He moved to Los Angeles, and I missed him terribly. Okay? And then he says, I'm going to come to Davis for a few days to see my aunt. Maybe I can come over and stay with you guys. We were living with my aunt at that time. I say, yeah. And I was working at Castilian. It was a Davis dormitory. I was a janitor there. And I remember he stayed in Davis for about 1 week. I called the entire week sick, even though we desperately needed money for rent. And we lived in Cranbrook Courts. Rent was $285 per month. 3 bedrooms. Now it's over $3,000. Oh, anyways, it's Biden's fault. So that's how you protect it. What time is it? Let me read you or give you a poem. Oh, we have good. با درد بساز چون دوای تو منم با کس منشین که آشنای تو منم گر کشته شدی مگو که من کشته شدم شکرانه بده که خونبهای تو منم. There are some pains. There are some yearnings and longings and some reflections that cause a good amount of discomfort. We are not creatures, as I've said many times, that welcome pain. We like things that give us a good amount of joy and happiness and pleasure. And this poem by Abu Sa'id Abul Khair, and I'll tell you about him a couple of weeks from now, one of the great saints, Sufis that the Middle East has ever produced. If you wake up one morning and you say, what am I doing with my life? It's going to be a painful few minutes. Become intimate with it. Live with it. It's going to make a mess of your life. Or just live with the pain. It is a companion who's never going to leave you. Your boyfriend will leave you. Your kids will die. Your parents will die. But the question of who am I? What am I? How should I use my time? These questions will never leave you. They're there from the moment you're born until you take your last breath. And Abu Sa'id says, since these friends, these pains are never going to leave you, be their roommates. Host them. They're not guests. And if you're able to become good friends with them, they will reveal themselves to you. And in their revelation, you will find aspects of yourself you have always longed to see. They will give you the answers. And that's how you protect any seed. You spend a good amount of time with them, even though they may be painful. Well, it's good to see all of you. Have a good day. Tell your parents I said hello. Have a nice weekend. Stay in touch. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You too. Thank you.
I don't want